Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. And yes, it is the holiday season, and as you guys know, we're still bringing the amazing guests to you guys. And today we have another amazing guest, Elizabeth. She is the author of "What the Hell Just Happened," right? You know, I, you know what? I probably got that wrong. But she's here to tell her story. She's here to talk about everything that she has going on. You guys sit back. If it's your first time, do me a favor, head over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification, and leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about it. And if you know anyone that can benefit from these conversations, please, please, please share it with them. Now, before we get started, I just want to let you know that this is for educational purposes only. Now, without further ado, I'm going to bring up my next guest. You guys, let's have fun. All right. Liz.
Hi. Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm actually the author of, am I allowed to swear on
Yeah.
this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Most
Okay.
definitely.
Just making sure. It's of What the Fuck Just Happened, not What the Hell Just Happened. So the
See, I
book.
knew I had something going on. I saw you. I was like, no, that's not it. I was like, oh, I'm gonna let her introduce it.
Yeah.
These are the
So
movies that go into the reels that saying people don't see anyway. You know,
it's
well,
okay.
how are you doing today?
I'm good. Yeah. I'm doing okay. Yeah. How are you?
I am doing well. I want to say thank you
Yeah.
for coming on the show. We've already talked and we had a beautiful conversation. You was on one of the panel discussions, and I was like, when you came back, was like, I want to be on your show. I was like, oh man, hell yeah. So
Yeah.
here we are today. So take a minute, introduce yourself, tell people where you're from.
Okay, so hi, I'm Liz. As I said, I'm author of WTF Just Happened, a sciencey skeptic explores grief, healing, and evidence of an afterlife, and podcast of host of WTF Just Happened, all about the afterlife, no woo. And I am in New York and I spend a few months every year in LA. So I guess I'm from both New York and LA, but mainly New York.
All right. Well, that is truly, truly awesome. So let's talk about your story. Yeah, how did Liz become who she is today?
Okay, so about WTF Just Happened, how I got involved with that. I was raised culturally Jewish, atheist, very secular, and I was in a very secular culture. So it was just completely irrelevant. Any thoughts of God or, and the only, and unfortunately, my dad passed in 2015, and that just shattered my world. I'm an only child. We're not super close with our extended families. So I just really was beside myself. And the only vision I ever had of an afterlife was the little bit I'd heard of the biblical, heaven, cloud, and no disrespect if anyone believes that. I just, the only reason I'd heard of something like that was belief, no evidence, no science. So I wondered, was there actually my very, very first thought was I started just a flash of thought, nothing logical. I knew it wasn't realistic, but so much of science fiction comes true. I had a
Mhm.
flash of a thought. Can we turn back time? That is a huge part of science fiction. Or can we manipulate time in some way? And then I went down many mental rabbit holes. Like maybe we are doing that. Maybe we just did travel back 50 years. And how would I really know that? And I started reading all about that. So I started reading about a lot of Einstein's theories of time relativity, which and quantum entanglement. And I started to notice, well, if time, one of the most basic, non changeable facts of our world, was a lot more, I guess, not the way we perceive it,
Mhm.
to use Einstein's word, relative, what else could there be? And that was my very next thought was, okay, let's say our consciousness is created by firing brain neurons. That's what I thought at the time. And it happened once. Why could that never happen again? Maybe in this universe, maybe, given that there's multiple big bangs, big crunches that go on eternally, maybe in another iteration of another big bang, but I wouldn't be me again. My dad wouldn't be him. But when your only other alternative is complete obliteration of your consciousness, I'll take it. So I started Googling that. That's when everything changed. I found 2 researchers, one who has since passed away, Dr. Ian Stevenson, and his protege, Dr. Jim Tucker. And I started reading everything about them. And they are child psychiatrists and professors at the University of Virginia, researching cases of kids with past life memories from database perspective, non-karma based, non-spiritual. And I was like, this is amazing. And from there, Dr. Tucker is part of a whole division at the University of Virginia called the Division of Perceptual Studies. And they study survival of consciousness, which really means afterlife, from a non-faith-based perspective, just very science database. And when I say faith, I don't just mean religions, specific religions. I mean, where you don't have to believe anything. This is data. This is science. And some of the information they were getting was just remarkable. I just started delving deeply, deeply in.
I love that. I definitely love that because I think we talked about this before. And I read a quote from someone. Actually, it was, I really wish I could remember the author's name. But they were talking about babies. It was a really good concept. And let me see if I can do it justice. The guy said, what if the reason why babies cry when they're born into the world is because they remember the past life that they had, and the punishment to keep others from knowing is that they can't talk?
Wow. Right? I mean,
maybe,
yeah.
Well, what I'm saying, going by what you just said, consciousness, right? I believe consciousness is passed through us as we come back into this world, But of course, my belief system is a little bit different than most. I what you right there, with religion, I have a hard time with, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I do believe in God, because I believe that I wouldn't be here without someone helping guiding me along the way, and helping me advance my thinking the way that it does. Now, I do intertwine it with consciousness, with the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, right? And I believe that there's a certain limit that the conscious mind can go to. And if you're searching for certain things, the depthness of it, you can unlock the unconscious mind, which would take you even further into the universe. And then that's where you begin to think about all of the possibilities of what is physics, right? And I come up with the term that physics is man-made. And when we realize that the laws of physics don't apply to us, that opens up the doors for us to travel unconsciously into the universe to explore certain answers, right? And if it intertwines with science, yes. And I find that everything kind of intertwines together, right? There's truth in both of them, depending on what you're looking for. There's conflict in both of them as well, depending on what you're looking for, right? And I just thought it was kind of amazing that when I read the quote about the babies, I was like, what if that is true?
Maybe.
We're coming back into the world with the memories of a past life. And if that is true, that means that the conscious mind does not dissipate. It expands. Now, how many times does it do that? Like you said, you wouldn't be you, I wouldn't be me, your dad wouldn't be him, or none of us, right? We come back in different forms, and it's interesting that so I watch a lot of baby TikToks, right? And it's freaking hilarious. It's hilarious because when you look at the expression on some of these babies' faces when they're looking at you, and nowadays babies are being, they're a little bit more advanced, right? They're sitting up, they're looking at things, and when you say certain things to you, they kind of look at you like, and people always go, this kid has been here before. Right? And I think that is just the most amazing thing. I was watching one where this little baby girl was sitting there talking to her mother, and you couldn't understand what she was saying, but she was just saying a whole lot of stuff. So her mother was like, if you don't like it, you can always go to bed. And the baby turned around and mocked her, like, ding, ding, ding. She was like, did she just mock me?
Like a baby, not like
Like,
even a 3
right?
Wow.
Had a whole lot to say. And her mother was like, did you just mock me? And the baby looked at her like, I was like, the baby understood. So now going back to what you just said, what if, what if that is true, right? That means that the way that we perceive death, because perception is reality, right? To the person who's perceiving. And so when we think of it that way, there's no right or wrong, right? There's no right way to do things. There's no wrong way to do things. You just kind of figure it out as you go. I think the words right and wrong were made up to kind of generalize a lot of things, or maybe make people believe in certain rules, right? To keep us from advancing here.
I still think there's rights and wrongs, though. I guess the difference is I don't think this is your only chance, this tiny little speck of time in eternity, and this is it, and then your consciousness is done. But still, I still think hurting other people, trying to force other people through laws to follow your belief set, there's still killing people. There's still stuff I think is wrong, but maybe how we're defining wrong. Maybe some of the people that are the worst, it's part of a many lives growing process. But I still, maybe another way I've heard people talk about this, and I hesitate to use the word vibration because it has so much woo connotations aligned with it, but maybe it is like I have heard people say, just for lack of a better word, like a lower vibration, and people who just have need to advance further. So, and sometimes I also think some of the people who seem the worst, and they are being the worst, they've just, not that it excuses it, but they have had so much trauma, and maybe some of the people who are, quote unquote, the best and living a life of kindness and help, they might have just had a life where they were shown mainly kindness and help. So
Right.
there's a way, but that, definitely is getting more into philosophy than science. But to what extent are we who we would be if we ourselves were born into completely different circumstances?
This is very true. And there was a study done on that. There was, can't believe who did a study, but they did a study on with mice, right? Mm-hmm. So in one box, they put around 20 different mice. They set the box up really, really nice, fed them really well. In another box, they made it more confined, where the mice were just over top of one another. The food wasn't as great and things like that. And what they found that, and I think this kind of goes along with what you were saying. If not, let me know. But I'm trying to explain it the best way I can. In the box where the food and everything was confined, the mice were prone to more violence. They were killing each other. Whereas in the other box, they thrive, right? So they did that for 6 months. Then they switched them. And I think this goes along with the environment once we start to conceptualize what that looks like, right? So they switched them in different boxes. And sure enough, it happened again. The mice who were switched from the bad environment, put into the good environment, they started to thrive. They started to build a community and all of those things. And the mice that were in the good box, well, they turned into the mice that was in the previous box. And it was, so then they took them out, put them made a huge, community and things like that. And they came together. So it's a learned behavior, right? And it also has to do with your environment. Now, when we take that and we look into it, real world concepts, well, does that happen? Yes, it does. We see this all the time. Consciously, And this is the reason why I say this. This again, this is just me. When we look at certain communities and how it's piled on with each other, you have communities that are full of wealth, you have communities that aren't, right? Look at what happens in those communities. The people that, I'm saying, the actions that they take and things like that is as if they've given up hope. Again, I could be wrong. It's always up for interpretation, and things like that. So, I'm a student of this world. I'm constantly learning, constantly evolving because I want to understand, because it helps me understand how to better serve and things like that. So it's, we go along that rabbit hole, and that rabbit hole got many, vectors in it that we can always go down. And this is the reason why I say sometimes I don't think there's a right and wrong, because if you take just an example, take a serial killer, say for instance, right? If you go and ask the serial killer if they think that it was wrong to kill these people, they would look at you and go, what do you mean? Right? And that stems from trauma, things like that. Most serial killers are born through that trauma. Now, if you ask the individual that's watching these crimes that are being happen, they would say that was wrong. Because they probably, like you said, they've never probably been introduced to that sort of environment. So it's perception, right? You know what I'm saying? And then this perception is in the eyes of the beholder. And so although we may feel that something is right or wrong, although sometimes we have to sit back and look at the person that we're talking to, and then it comes down to asking the right questions, right? When we pass away from this world and things like that, the first thing that we do is that we begin to question this world. Is there an afterlife? Is my loved one in heaven, or are they in hell? And things like that. But I think we do that with everyone, right? The grieving process, when we think about it, right? How does that intertwine with the grieving process? And then how do we begin to educate individuals from a point where Liz will come in and go, hey, this is what I've come up with. Tell me what you think. So how do you intertwine your perception and helping others deal with their grief?
I guess, well, I don't fully like to use the word perception because that implies a type of belief. Yes, in one sense, everything's a perception, but nevertheless, did this through reading about a bunch of data and studies and science, as well as exploring some things myself. So I think telling people, hopefully giving them a type of something that goes beyond hope, something tangible, something substantial, that there's valid reason to think we survive death. I actually call it a preponderance of evidence. And I think the absolute bleakness of death is many people think they're never, ever going to see their loved ones again. That's it. And I think that's also a lot of existential angst as well, that one day we're going to die and we'll never, ever exist again. We'll never experience consciousness. And so I think just letting people know about this very little known research and tangible reasons, and reasons that don't require a faith in anything or a belief, but being like, no, well, this happened and this happened. And you put it all together, it's very logical to conclude that consciousness is different than we perceive it on this earth, and that we only perceive this tiny little section of all that's out there. I mean, that's just a fact no one can dispute. So, I mean, there's multiple aspects I can bring to that, but really that it's very logical to think that this is not it and you will see your loved ones again. And there's even evidence that they're still around watching in another dimension, and there could be types of communication with them. And, so that you're not as separated as you might think or perceive.
the reason why I asked that, because again, I do a lot of research. I study a lot. I'm a student of this world.
Mhm.
And so I remember thinking about before my son had passed away, and for some odd reason, my mind had gone to this bizarre place. Not really bizarre, it kind of really just took me to a place that made me think in a different perspective, aspect. I said, and I was thinking, like, I wonder what happens, when you leave this dimension. Is there another place that you're born into? Right.
Mhm.
And if so, what does that look like? Are they different versions of us? Just in, maybe in a different body, different, and they see in life through the eyes that they've previously had, just they're born to different parents. Like you said before, you're not you, I'm not me. No one's who they are. You just leave this place, you go to the next one. And I thought about the possibilities of that, right? What if that is true? And if that is true, that means time is irrelevant, because you leave this place, you go into another place, and that just means that it's just a transference of consciousness into a new, right? What does that world look like? These are the things that rattle my brain. I'm like, I
Yeah.
wonder, man, I really wonder. So when we look at grief and that aspect and things like that, we that are just left behind, I think we mourn the living flesh, and I think we kind of get lost in the spirit, within the consciousness that leaves and goes elsewhere. And if we look at it in that aspect, then what are we truly losing?
Right. Well, what I've come to think too, because I know you quoted how I'd said in the beginning that I wouldn't be me again, my dad wouldn't be him again. But that was, as I've studied more, I actually have changed my mind about that. No, I'm not precisely exactly us again, as far as I know. I mean, depending how time works, maybe you can kind of jump in eternally into you at this moment. Who knows? There's an evidence of that. That's getting into philosophy and possibilities. But
Mm.
I've come to think so that information can be stored in some quantum form that we don't understand. That it can then, like, personalities or identities can be stored. Just granted, they would be different in different dimensions, different persons that we might be, but it's still like just the way we're still us as a baby and us at, like, given we live to our 90s, 95, like, we're still the same. And I've come to think there's something like that goes on, that our consciousness is stored in a quantum experience, which is where we experience all our lives. And like it quantum entangles in some way with our brains that work more like a laptop, or phone downloading parts from the cloud, but it's not all of us. And then when we finish this life, it goes in as just the way yesterday has gone into part of who we are today. And it becomes part of that as just another experience, but we still get to be ourselves. That is one major change I've had. But of course, we still miss having our favorite people with us in this world.
Yeah.
It's not the same. I mean, it's a lot better than what I used to think it was, but I'd still, it doesn't make grief go away. And I think that was a misconception I had when I first studied it. It helps massively to have hope and not feel just pure hopelessness and loss. But I've noticed loss still. There's no avoiding very agonizing grief as a human.
It's very true. I think that's the most truest experience as a human being that we will ever encounter, right? Because
Right.
there is no there's no hypothetical theory when it comes down to it, and I've done research. I've sat down. I go, well, what about this? I've come up with theories, and then I've tested those theories, and I've had to go back and go, well, that wasn't the way that was, because I always try to make sense of what I'm going through emotionally and things like that. And so then what I did is that I go, well, the one factor that's in there is the emotional aspect. What are emotions? They're just human experience. They're a reaction to something, right? Or a response to something that you're going through. Okay. So now that I understand that, I can take the emotion out and begin to question everything else that comes along with that. So believe it or not, I got notebooks and stuff like that with just theories that I've encountered, which has helped me along the way, and things like that. And I just went, you know what? This is an ongoing thing. There's so many ways to go about it, and that's where I came up with the term of there may be no right or wrong way to do this, right? And which goes back to the basic concept of grief. There's no right or wrong way to do it. This is in a logical sense. If you love someone or care for someone, then it don't necessarily have to be love. You just care for someone deeply. This is the price that you're going to pay when they go.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me was more logical to think of, like, okay, well, the only way to avoid something like that is to be emotionally detached, not to allow yourself for that community, not to allow anyone into your life. And then I have to look at what sort of life is that? Are you truly being authentic to yourself? Because I believe that we're here for community, to talk life into one another, to uplift each other, to be there, to walk with each other in those dark moments, to share knowledge, right? Because it's as if Liz was to call me up and say, hey, I need someone to talk to. My job at that point is just to be a visitor in your world, because I want to learn how to walk with you, because everybody is going to walk differently. So that's when I take those different philosophies or those different theories and be able to apply it in a different way, depending on the individual that I'm speaking with.
Right. And I guess one thing that jumped out that you said that I know we talked about in the group too is there's no wrong way to grieve. And there is so much correction to how you're grieving. There's always people just waiting in the wings being like, no, you're doing it wrong. Maybe they say it kinder than that, but I can't tell you how many people would say to me, oh, no, you need to. And I'm like, no, that's maybe you needed that, or maybe one day you will need that. That's not what I need. There's just, there's constant correction to how you handle grief.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to something that we figured out along the way, right? What works for one person may not work for me, so
Right.
I'm very careful not to advise people about how to do it, right? I just go, I'll walk with you until you figure it out, right?
Right.
And that opens up the doors for me not to be non-judgmental, and to be a student of this individual as they go through this process, right? Because that's what it is. It's a process. It's a process of reinterpreting life and things like that. And I think that's where we all get the find our way, so to speak, right? Because life is no longer the same the way that we was when we had our loved ones. Because life has taken on a different meaning. The what ifs are out the door now. The possibilities become, the impossibilities have now become possibilities. And the reason why I say that, my worst loss was my son. And I never thought in a million years that I would lose a child, to death. I thought I had this conception of life that, hey, he's going to outlive me. My children, and I think that's a misconception as well. That's one of the myths, right? And then once this happened, everything in my world was upside down. I had to go back in and I began to think to myself, where does it say that we're exempt from this? Where does it say that this is the way that it's supposed to be? There's nothing that says that, right? But there are, and this is where everything for in my life began to intertwine with past stories. You know, I've read the Bible. I was more interested in the stories than anything else, because the one thing that I found that this had been going on since the beginning of time. So what makes me any different, or what makes any of us any different? Nothing. So when you come to that, I think there comes a place and a road that you could take to come to a place of understanding, better understanding of the world, our conscious mind. And instead of living in a life of bitterness and hurt and things like that, your emotions you can choose. And that's just my belief. I believe I can choose to do this. You know, I can choose not to feel a certain way. I can choose not to be in certain environments. I can choose. It's my choice.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you think about that?
I have, for myself, and I trust that it's this way for you. I feel there's some choices and some not. I don't feel I can choose my emotions. There's no way a loss isn't just going to feel so much pain. What I do with that pain is my choice. Where I live is my choice. Who I let into my life is my choice. Who I chose to distance myself from at that time is my choice. So it's what I think I relate to everything you say, except you can choose your feelings or your emotions, because I don't feel I can choose them, but I use them as signals. I guess anytime I had tried, and I didn't do this related to grief, just other things in my life, I tried to choose my feelings more, or be like, well, I'm going to make the best of this and I could be happy here. And it left me stuck in very unhealthy situations. When I think I've come to think emotions are a guide to letting us know when something's right or wrong. And in grief, you can only do so much with that. Like if you're in like a school that's really wrong for you, you know, I was in schools that were very wrong for me as a child, and I felt very unhappy, but I felt I didn't have a choice. So I would kind of make the best of it and tell myself I could feel differently. And that ended, I think, yeah, I guess for when I consider very painful, sad emotions guides that something's wrong. Now, what action can you take? So when it comes to grief, in a sense, you're stuck. I'm feeling horrible pain. I want my dad here. I can't bring him back. That is not an option. So there are multiple ways you can respond to that. You can deny it and just keep going and keep going. You can, you know, become really bitter. And I'm not saying any of those are even wrong. Maybe you do need to do that for a while. Maybe you need to take a year and just hate the world. So I'm not even putting judgment on that. You can just lie in bed and cry. You can try to find joy in the moments of the day. You can, you know, what I chose to do, it's called, I guess, post-traumatic growth, where I I chose to look into some way this couldn't be true. How could I be with my dad? And I looked into every option and found this evidence, and something, looked for something that I genuinely thought could be true, because you could always tell yourself anything. I could always say, oh, I believe he's in heaven with God. I mean, again, if you believe that, I'm not at all criticizing. I'm only talking about my experience. I do not see any reason to believe in God or heaven. So that just wouldn't have worked for me. So I think you have to yeah, if your emotions, if bad emotions, you're like, what? They're a guide. And can you leave the situation? No, I cannot leave a life where my dad died. I can't. So, not now. I mean, one day I will leave this life. I'm not going to have a choice of that. But I can't undo that happened. I can't go live as me without that having happened. So now what can I do? So I kind of feel like instead of deciding how I feel, my emotions give me information about the situation and the reality of it. And what can I do with that?
Mm.
So that's my take on it.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that because I'm still learning, right?
Me too. Yeah.
Talking with you, it's like, those are possibilities, and
Mhm.
I intertwine it with the things that I think about, not a belief system, but the things that I think about. My belief system is totally different, and I agree with what you said. You can't change certain things. Now, the reason why I came up with these things that I think about and my belief system, because at an early age, I was I was introduced to the darkness of the world at a very, very early age, and from there, it was the people in my environment that saw me, and they used to always tell me, "Your emotions will get you killed." So now, with that being said, now there's a different understanding about why I think the way that I do, right? So I had to learn at an early age, and it came in handy when it came down to surviving in this world. You know, um, it was as if I had to detach myself from family and friends. And then an older guy came to me and said, and this was the thing that really, really just solidified and validated that, hey, you know what? This up here, what I'm feeling in here, doesn't matter. I need to disassociate myself. He said, you see these people that are around you, these people, the homies in the hood and things like that. He goes, don't get attached to them. So, and I didn't understand that at the moment because I had never seen someone get killed before, or I'd never experienced loss. And then if I did, I looked at the relevance of it and it was like, okay, I'm gonna keep going. This was a natural, everyday thing that we endured. So when it came down to seeing some of the most horrific things, um, it was easier for me to go, I gotta keep going. Prime example, one of my friends, we got caught in a drive-by. The bullet hit him in the head. His face, so whole side of his face hit me in my face. I turned around and I looked at him, watching him on the ground, very, very in detail. Now I'm looking at him, I'm going, all right. I got up, wiped that off my face, and I kept moving. I never once said I look back and think about it. I never once thought about it. Emotionally, I was detached from everything. So, and Lakia, I want to put this up here and tell me what you think about this. And I think we both may have the same philosophy. She says that she believes that anytime a person is grieving, will have bad emotions.
Mhm. Yeah.
Let's dive into that for a minute because I do agree with that. And now that I'm older and I'm a lot more mature mentally, I'm emotionally mature, right, and intelligent when it comes down to that. Because now, just like yourself, I've had to go in and revamp the way that I've thought. I've had to take those teachings that no longer was relevant to me and the life that I live, and I had to retrain myself to think about certain things. Now, do I still can I still detach myself emotionally? Yes, I can. Now there's times losing like yourself, losing my parents. There's times where that emotion is very heavy on me. And with the brain that I have to go back in and make sense of it.
I guess I think You probably can shut off emotions, including bad ones, but I don't think you can shut off one emotion and not shut them all off. I think you can go into survival mode, which you have to do sometimes, and just be like, I had to give a presentation when my dad was in hospice for work, and I didn't feel for that hour. I don't remember what I said. All I know is someone told me I did a good job. I don't remember hours surrounding that. And in a survival state or shock, I mean, I want to say I'm so sorry you saw that with your friend. And there are times emotions can get you killed in times of violence or war, and you have to shut it off and just survive. But then you can't have the good feelings. You can't use your emotions as signals.
Yes.
So if you're going to have a life of happiness, you have to feel the pain. Otherwise, you just shut them all off, and you meet people like that. They're just numb, but you don't find yourself. You're not getting the signals that this is the career I want. This is the person I love. You kind of go into a numbed out state where you feel no emotions. And if you decide for whatever reason you do want to feel happiness, you're going to have to feel the pain too. And I think, you know, and I mean, there's always going to be an exception. So when I say this, I'm only saying this from like my single opinion. So many grievers are just told like by people that this is what I feel, therefore everyone feels this. So please, like anyone, if this doesn't resonate with you, don't think I'm saying it does. I could only speak from my like being one person out of 8 billion people. So I think that if you decide or something happens that you want to feel any form of happiness, be in touch with yourself in any way, and you start to try to feel happy, if you haven't faced the pain too, that is going to come up, and you are going to have to process it and feel it and experience it. And I think there's really you either could be just a completely numb, zoned out, feel nothing person, or you are going to feel tremendous pain when you have a loss.
I totally agree. And that's the
Mhm.
reason why I said that. It's because
Mhm.
that whole revamping thing, this is, leaving one life and going into another that I was unfamiliar with. I
Right.
did have to go through and allow myself
Mhm.
to begin to feel. And what happened is that my instincts began to fire off. You know what I'm saying? And I
Mhm.
began to look at these things because I never understood them.
Mhm.
I never understood them, and I was like, well, whoa, what is this emotion? When it came down to caring for other people, you know, well, that was hard for me because of the life that I had lived. I've been on my own for quite some time. So, when it came down to it, letting people into my life, as people would say nowadays, being open to receiving love was a part of it, right? I was like, oh, I can give love, but then I thought about it. How can I give something that I don't know? So I had to learn. And that came through heartbreak, right?
Mhm.
Wow, this is what this feels like, right? Um, how can you care for someone when you've been selfish with the caring that you've been giving yourself? So then I had to learn that as well. And that came through the lesson of being betrayed. Now, what I mean by that, people that I cared about, or thought that cared about me, betrayed me. Now, it taught me two things. Not everyone is deserving of the careness that you have. So I had to learn discernment. There's people that are worth it. Nowadays in my life, everyone I encounter is worth it. So these are things that I've learned over a period of time. My unconscious mind said, hey, let's look at it in these other different variations. And I explored them. And I came back and I said, you know what? This is worth it.
Mhm.
Love, all of those things it became a beautiful place because again, like you said, in order to experience true happiness, you first have to be around people that are happy to experience those things because this is how we learn through that connection. And I didn't understand it, and I'm still learning. Hopefully I'm better at it, than I was 20, 30 years ago, and I believe I am. I believe that I'm in a really good place, because I don't think if I was, I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do now, because there comes a sense of empathy, right? And I've had to be different versions. I think we all have, be different versions of ourselves as we go through this life, from the time that we're children to the time that we become grown-ups. And what does those different versions of us look like?
Mhm.
Right. I think that's a
Right.
beautiful concept as well, right? You're like when you put it together, it's like I went through all of this in order to become who I am today. Was it worth it? I think a lot of people don't understand, or they miss um, the worthiness of their life as we begin
Right.
to evolve into who we're becoming. Hmm.
I think you have to sort of I'm still processing a little of what you said. It's very powerful. And I guess the thing that just pops into my mind is, and you were talking about, you make a choice. You make a choice to become yourself. And sometimes it's harder. You do have to feel the pain. You have to face things. You maybe have to realize certain things in your life aren't good for you or weren't good for you. And I think there's a type of grief in that too. You're having to let go of certain things. And I think there's other ways where you can not kind of let yourself become yourself too. And yeah, I haven't formulated or thought about this enough to put it together very coherently. I hope I'm clear, but
No, you're
this is
you're
just what,
fine. You're fine. We're
yeah,
just talking about, we're
yeah,
having a conversation right now, and I'm learning so much from you.
yeah,
Like if
you,
I was a
you.
student in your class, I'm like, what? Really? And
I
so, and I
feel that from listening to you. Yeah.
think so you understand what I'm saying? Like it's we give each other information to be able to carry with ourselves, to think about
Mhm.
and dive into. Maybe some of it works, maybe some of it don't, right? But that's the
Yeah.
beautiful part about it, right? Not everything needs to work
Hmm.
for you, right?
Right.
But
And
maybe,
oh,
no,
sorry.
no, go ahead, please.
Oh, yeah. No, I guess the one thing that just popped into my mind that I think kind of along what I was saying too is that I think getting to become the best version of yourself, as we were talking about a little, there requires, unfortunately, pain too, because it's leaving it's sort of having to be honest with yourself about stories that maybe aren't as easy to face, like things, to give a very generalization, like things you were told your family were good for you that maybe really weren't. And there's a real sadness about that and a realization of things you missed out on, or things that maybe you're going to have to give up, or people you're going to have to cut out that you always thought would be there. Maybe you don't cut them out, but following this, you're just not going to be able to connect with them, or maybe they'll cut you off. I mean, there's just lots of it takes having to accept that some things are going to be really sad, I guess, or hard, or
I love that you just said that, because as as you begin to talk about it, I begin to think about um, the sacrifices, right? The people that come and go out of our lives and things like that. And I think for me, and again, just for me, and maybe someone can relate to it, I begin not to take things personal, right? When I realized that I used to believe that people came into my life to take from me, and then once they were done with me, they discarded me, right?
Mhm.
Now, on the flip side, now here's something to ponder. I had to think about this. I go, what if I'm the seasonal one? Maybe, maybe it's not them. Maybe it was me, right? So then we think about the journeys that we have with one another. And it took me a little bit to go back, and I had to look at my life, and I had to look at the people that I encountered along the way. What was the distinguished factor that was in there? Me.
Mhm.
Everyone that I ever encountered. It was, and the feeling that came was, what I'm saying, they're here to take something from me and going about their way. I began to think about that as well. So I began to look at different journeys that I've had throughout this life. And I went, I'm the seasonal one. It's no longer personal. Now I can come to a place of acceptance. Now I can appreciate the company that is with me during that time. And instead of looking at it when they have to go along their journey, because we all have our own different journeys that we have to go on to become more of who we're supposed to be, more of our authentic self, right? In every aspect of it. Say, for instance, and I'm going to use us as an example, and tell me if this is something that, maybe I'm misreading or something like that. But say, for instance, we've known each other. And then all of a sudden, Liz go, hey, I'm moving to New York to pursue my career. And, I'm saying, I'm become this beautiful actress. And, this is the path that I'm on. Instead of looking at that and going, why are you leaving me? I have chosen to go, I wish you the best of luck along your endeavors. And I am going to wish you well along your journey. I'm going to thank you for your time. And I'm going to perceive in the direction that I'm supposed to go in. And just maybe we see each other in the future. That's fine too. Maybe I don't. I'm okay with that. Right? Because I know that you are becoming who you're supposed to be. And I am going the path that I'm supposed to be. And I walk that path, whether if it's, a couple of years until I meet the next person. And that's where I came up with the concept of I'm the seasonal one. And I apply it to the work that I do now, this grief work, being allowed in other people's spaces and being in a place of humility and humbleness that I bow down when people invite me in. And then I become that passenger with them as they begin to figure out their life, and then I go on about my way. It's not personal. I don't take it personal, but there comes certain rules that I have to live by now. Now that I understand a lot more, just me, it comes down to relationships and things like that. I have to pay attention to the conversation, because last thing I want to do is take someone else's human experience, especially if they're in a more vulnerable place, and become the person that takes advantage of that. So I limit myself. I listen. That's what we call trauma bonding. I go, see you, but I cannot allow myself to get this close to you because of where you're at. I understand my role in this world. And so I appreciate people's time, their experience more in depth now. And I think that's what makes me who I more authentically am, because I do understand now my purpose, my role, and the direction that I go in may change. I'm open to that. I'm open to the sacrifices I have to make. I'm open to everything that this world has to offer me. I'm open to giving up things that make me comfortable in this life, because comfortability is just a thought, right? So I'm open to all of those things as I move through.
Right. I guess what stood out to me that I relate to it some about, I think I used to be really careless about who I let in my life. And
Yeah.
even tying it back to you were saying, you don't have to feel things. I think I'd been around a lot of toxic people growing up, and was in I mentioned very toxic schools. That's their thing. Might write a book about it as well someday. But I turned off being aware of feeling around people. So it was just have, whoever comes along, not really pay attention to how I felt. And I noticed a similar thing. I was around a lot of people constantly who turned out not to be good friends, toxic people, toxic bosses as well. And then it was like, wait, the common factor is me. And I keep letting these people in, and difficult people that I would treat as if they were normal. So people who want to have chaos, instead of my being like, that's what they want, I'd be like, oof, I've got to figure this out to smooth over. Going on the assumption that everyone wants things like kind and happy and smooth. No, that's not some people's goal. So I have, similarly to what you said, have to really step back and be like, I can have a coffee with a person. Doesn't mean they have to really be in my life. I can learn something from everyone. I think everyone has a life experience.
Yes.
But some of the stuff that I would take maybe really seriously, like, oh God, I really hurt their feelings when I said that. And they maybe like, just, I'm not even thinking of a specific example, just a generalization. Maybe they confront me on it and I feel bad and try to work it out. There's people who maybe you didn't even say anything. They just have to keep fights and drama going. And I'm like, wait, I don't want to play that game. That's how I want to live. And I'm never going to achieve the goal of, we're speaking two different languages. I'm taking seriously that this thing I said hurt them, whereas they're just creating chaos and they didn't even really care. They want to keep the chaos going. And those are the people I have had to step away from and be very careful in who I'm letting in, and step back if I see those signs of that. And maybe this was just a friend we were supposed to have coffee with once a year. Maybe this is just someone I'm supposed to go on like 2 dates with. Maybe this is a guy that, we're just together for a month, because I start to see those signs and I'm like, wait, I'm going to be honest with myself that that's not going to go anywhere healthy. So it's, I think, yeah, I don't really have a concluding line about that, but just,
No.
yeah,
I don't
just
think
being
it's
like,
meant to be concluded. I think, as students, right? As students of this, I think it's meant for us to keep learning more about who we are, right? What we're willing to accept, what we're not willing to accept.
Right.
And now I use this concept. If I go around, because I have a lot of friends, I have a handful of friends, true friends. I have a lot of associates, and I listen to conversations. And sometimes I love just being their observer and just listening to what people say. And the ones who complain, I sit around and listen to what they complain, and then I look, over a period of time, I listen, how long is this going on? Then it dawns on me. If a person is a thief, and they're honest with me, I'm a thief. You help me better know how to approach you. You help me learn not to put certain things around you. And people teach you from their actions around you. So you see these things. People don't hide it. We just choose to overlook it. So if I know this about an individual and that person is truly honest with me in this aspect, well, okay, I know what steps I need to take. Now, the problem is that when they go, I'm reformed, I don't do this anymore, and a person began to trust them. Now, trust is one of those things that is earned and not given to everyone. You have to know who to trust and who not to trust, and you have to be really picky about that. So when you do these things, maybe there's not an incident in 6 months, maybe a year, 2 years, things like that. It takes one time. When you put $1,000 down in front of this individual, you walk away, and this person goes right back to who their nature is.
Right.
Are you now going to get upset because this person did it? Or are you going to take responsibility because you knew that this person was this? That is the question. And I get into discussions about this all the time. How can you be upset for someone being who they told you that they were? Well, they said that, yeah, I know. But they've been doing this for a very long time. They've only practiced this aspect of it for this short amount of time. And you still put this around them. Now you're upset because they did exactly what's in their nature, their true nature. And again, this is the reason why I don't take things personally. It's not personal. I take full responsibility for that.
Mhm.
And that's just me. And again, I'm on a different path of understanding people, being able to accept people for who they are and not for who they say that they are, but who they authentically are. I don't expect people to be like me. I don't expect people to live the same life that I live. I don't. That's impossible. I think that would be a very boring place, right? But I do find a beauty in it, in taking responsibility for a lot of things in
Yeah,
this world.
there's something that stood out you said about you don't expect people to be like you, and I think that's a mistake a lot of us make, because you also said about not, noticing certain things when people tell you. I think we all don't hear things often that are not like us. Like, again, like, so you said someone's a thief. I'm not a thief. That goes completely out of my morals. And so maybe I don't see it. So maybe I'm with a person and they're like, haha, did you see I just took $10 off the table that they'd left for the tip? Maybe
Right.
that doesn't even hit my radar. Maybe because that's so out of my reality, they come back to the table and say that, and I laugh, and I'm like, that was like a funny joke. They're joking, And I think we, maybe not in such an obvious moment, but maybe we do that all the time. We're just like, oh, I must have
Yeah.
misunderstood this, because that is not something we would do. Or we're like, oh, I must have misunderstood, or we just do not process certain things
Right.
that we consider really wrong. And that's how con artists get away with things. That's how, narcissists reel people in. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts about those. And it's
Yeah.
just because you're like, oh, I must have misunderstood. I must have misheard them. They must be joking. Like and you just, it doesn't go on your radar of reality. And you look back and you're like, oh, I kind of dismissed that thing. And then
Hmm.
it goes like deeper and deeper.
Yeah. But and again, that goes into being a student of this world, right? Having different life experiences and things like that. And I say, for me, I've just chosen to explore this world in a different way because culturally, I've been raised, this. I was raised in a different environment around certain people. And it wasn't until I broke away from that environment, I went into another environment. So now I'm learning from a different culture of people. And I left that one. And it's been a journey, right? It's been a journey with no real destination, just experiences. Now
Right.
it took me to be hurt beyond belief to go back in to actually start to explore. Why? And that was always the question that I had. Why? I never questioned other people. I've just observed other people. And sometimes they make me laugh. And sometimes I just go, not for me. But I let people reveal who they are because one thing I've always learned, be patient with people, but be patient with yourself. Try not to rush people into revealing who they are because there's a lot of pushback. I let people get comfortable with me. Then I see the mask come off. Now, that may take 6 months to a year, but for my own safety, I have boundaries. I watch. When I see the mask come off, I know who you truly are at that moment. At that moment, in those moments, those various moments that come around, I can now make a conscious decision whether or not if I want you in my life, because I can choose. And it's not personal. It's not personal at all. But people have a tendency to put that mask on because they want so badly to fit into your world, even though they may not fit. They may not be that puzzle piece, right?
Mhm.
And that's fine. They're going to go to find their people. They're going to find their tribe, and they're going to fit just perfectly inside of there. Not that I'm being harsh or anything like that. I just say, hey, not for me.
Mhm.
choose that. But
Right.
you have to have patience with yourself, and you have to have patience with other people. Even though it's not on your radar, maybe it's something that you're not looking for. That's fine too, right? But when you learn the lesson, when you do learn that lesson, what are you going to do with that information? And Lakaya just put a question up here. Can a person be disconnected from someone dying? Yes, you can. You truly can, depending on the relationship that you've had with that individual. So that is, again, that is up for perception of the individual who's in that experience with that. So yeah, you can most definitely be disconnected from someone who's dying. I've been disconnected from people who's died. It's a human nature thing. Some people I just never had a connection with or a relationship with, right? I was just there with other people. Now I'm a strong empath. I can be in the same room with other people and I can feel their emotions, not necessarily meaning that I'm connected to the person that's dying. But I think that's what makes us effective in a lot of ways, having that sort of discernment or attachment or detachment with that individual. Because when you detach, you think about things more logically.
Mhm.
That makes you more effective, especially if you're a grief worker like myself, and speak the language of grief. I have to remain emotionally detached from certain things so I don't take away from the experience from the people that are connected to these individuals, because I realize that my experience and my story does not belong there. So I understand my place. I understand my place in those moments. They're here for what I can provide for them. They're here for the gift that I have. And I have to be able to be open to give that wholeheartedly so others can receive it. So yes, to answer that question, and tell me what you think about that, and we'll begin to wrap this thing up. I'm pretty sure you have a busy day today. It's
I'm
close to
sure you do too. Yeah.
hey, you see what I do? This is me, right? I work all the time. You know what I'm saying? And having conversations like this, I'll get off here like, you know what? Yes.
Yeah.
Want to apply these things.
Yeah. It's been you've shared so much wisdom. I feel like I'm going to be processing this over the next few months. Oh, yeah. And I guess you wanted me to
Yeah.
also
Just
comment
what do
on,
you, yeah. What do you think
in
about that?
terms of this, I'm actually not 100% clear if I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name of the person who posted this, if they meant disconnected emotionally. Can you not feel the pain of it, or literally you disconnect, like maybe it's a family member who you were not connected with has mistreated you? So I'm going to kind of discuss both. If you've had a family member who's passing, or someone who's been a close friend that you had disconnected with, and there's pressure that now they are terminal, you're supposed to be around them, that's I don't think that's another thing that's right or wrong. It's you have to do it for you. If it is too painful, you're not under any moral obligation to be there.
Right.
If it will haunt you with regret the rest of your life that you're not there, then do that for yourself. If it will feel so painful to be there and you feel you're doing it for societal moral obligation, no, don't go there. I mean, it is not an easy answer. Maybe really talk it over with somebody about what you feel is the best thing truly, but it's what you feel. There is not, this is how you're supposed to do it.
Right.
You need to take care of yourself. I Obviously, if you're disconnected from a person, they earn that. And it was their actions. And you do not need to cause any more harm from yourself. If you mean disconnected emotionally, a few ways to speak to this. First of all, I think if you're not understanding why you're not feeling more pain over someone that you lost, why are you feeling disconnected? That's a really normal emotion too. It's like shock. Like, Tony, to comment on what you were saying, you just saw the horrible trauma with your friend. You just stood up and moved on. Like when you have shock, sometimes you do feel very, very disconnected. Like I've talked to people who said they didn't grieve for the first year, 2 years, 3 years. They had to survive. They were supporting a family or they were doing something and they were like, why am I not feeling grief? And then it completely hit them when they were in a space where they could, whether the reality of it hit them. Also, if you mean disconnect, is it possible like you're feeling a lot of pain and you want to disconnect from that more? Like, well, if you're feeling the pain, then you can't. That's not who you are. Like, you can't help, that you're feeling this. So now what are you going to do with that? Only you can answer that. So again, no right or wrong way. I started to explore evidence of an afterlife and wrote a book and started a podcast. No one could have told me ever I was going to do that. Everyone was coming in telling me, no, do this, do that. So if you're not disconnecting from the pain naturally, that's not how you're able to do it. So, really be very genuine with yourself about what you're truly feeling. And then give yourself the grace to follow the needs that you have every day. Is it cry in bed all day? Is it cancel on some friends? Is it go out every night with your friends, but you're concerned that's disrespectful? Again, people handle it completely their own way. So I hope that I did answer your question because I wasn't exactly clear what that meant by disconnect. So
no, I think that was beautiful, Lakia. Let us know how what you got from there as we begin to wrap this up. And thank you for coming on and sharing your comments with us. It means a lot to me. Thank you very, very much. Much love and respect to you. And Liz, I always ask my guests if you could leave the audience with something. What would you leave them with?
I'll leave them with two quick things. As I've said throughout this, there's no right or wrong way to grieve. You do you. That's the only way to do it. And that, again, myself, very science-minded, complete atheist, I have come to think the evidence is so strong that there's an afterlife. So in my adding, I'm sciencey and atheist, that means this evidence is strong. So whatever your belief sets are, hopefully this just adds to some comfort and hope that your loved ones are around you more than you realize.
Yes, I believe that. I definitely. Now, where can people find you and where can people find your book?
So you can find me on my website at wtfjusthappened.net. You can link to my book from there, which is currently just on Amazon. Hoping to expand it to some other places at some point, but right now it's on Amazon. And you can also find my podcast, WTF Just Happened, all about the afterlife, no woo, on all podcast apps. And again, all on my website. You can link to all of it. I'm very active on Instagram and somewhat active on TikTok, so you can follow me on both of those. Again, all my website, WTFJustHappened.net. Thank you so much. And thank you for giving this very wonderful platform where people have you offered so much wisdom that I'm really going to carry with me. So I really appreciate that.
That's what we're doing. You did the same to me as well. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you sharing and allow me to go along this journey with you, to be a student in your world today. I definitely appreciate that. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your time with myself and my audience. So I appreciate that. Thank you for being on the show today. And for everyone else who will be tuning in or have tuned in, if you haven't already, do me a favor, head over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop another episode. And if you know anyone or if that can benefit from these conversations that we have, do me a favor, share it with them. And until next time, Liz, thank you. Guys, thank you for the support. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for the love that you guys are giving. You guys have a great and wonderful holiday. We will see you guys again. And until next time, I love you. Peace.